You helped. You were there when they needed someone. You did the thing. You showed up. By any visible measure, you did exactly what a caring person does. And yet, something shifted. The person you helped became slightly harder to reach, slightly less willing to ask, slightly more careful around you than they were before. Not because they're ungrateful, not because they don't value what you did, but because something in the way it was offered, something invisible, something neither of you named, made them feel like a problem you were solving rather than a person you were with. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being helped in ways that don't quite fit, from receiving care that costs the other person something visible, from needing something and knowing, somehow, that the need is an inconvenience. Most people who create this feeling are not trying to. They genuinely want to help. The intention is real. The care is real. But care, badly calibrated, can do something the person offering it never intended. Today I want to show you 7 ways people help someone, genuinely, with real love, that quietly make that person feel like a burden. Because the goal of care isn't just to provide something. It's to leave the other person feeling more like themselves, not less. My name is Daniel Mercer, and one of the things I've observed consistently in how care goes wrong between people who genuinely love each other is that the problem is almost never the intention. Often the problem isn't the willingness to help, it's the way the help lands. When someone is vulnerable, they notice small signals more than usual. The sigh before the offer, the schedule that had to be rearranged, the way they're treated once the difficult moment has passed. Good intentions don't erase those signals, and the gap between what was meant and what was received is where the feeling of being a burden quietly lives. Here are 7 ways it gets created. Number 1. Helping with visible effort. The help arrives, but so does the weight of it. The sighs, the rearranged schedule, the mention of what had to be canceled, moved, or sacrificed. Not as a complaint exactly, but as information, context, a way of communicating the size of what was given. The person offering the help may simply be explaining what had to change. They're not asking for gratitude, but the person receiving it hears something different. They hear, "This was a burden. My need was an inconvenience." The help was given, but it cost something real. And next time, they'll cost something real again. And so they start to calculate. They begin measuring whether their needs are worth the visible expense they create. They start to manage their needs downward, not because they've been refused, but because the cost of asking has become too visible to ignore. The help was real. The care was real. But something in how it arrived told the other person that their need was a weight. After that, asking again can feel harder, even when the help was given willingly. Number 2. Moving to action before the person feels met. Something is wrong, and the person who cares moves immediately into action, finding solutions, making calls, researching options, doing the practical things that might fix what's broken. Picture this. Someone tells you something is wrong, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you are already searching for what to do, what to call, who to contact, what might fix it. The practical problem gets attention before the person inside it does. The instinct is genuine. It comes from love, from the discomfort of watching someone suffer when there might be something that could help. But what often happens in that movement towards solutions is that the feeling, the actual experience of the person in distress, gets bypassed. The question of how they're doing, what they're afraid of, what they need right now, those get skipped in favor of the more manageable question of what can be done. That's a specific kind of loneliness. To be helped efficiently and still feel unmet. The problem got attention. The person didn't. Number 3. Helping and then checking in too much. The help was given. And then, from genuine care, from the desire to make sure things worked out, the check-ins begin. How are you doing? Did that help? Have you tried this? Are you sure you don't need more? The intention is warmth. But when every interaction becomes another check-in, care can start to feel like surveillance. Each one, however kindly meant, is a reminder that the person needed help, that they were in a state that required intervention, that the person helping them is still watching to see if they've recovered. That's not what was meant, but it's what was received. Picture this. Something hard happened. They told you. You helped. And now, weeks later, every time you see them, you ask how they're doing with it, in the particular tone that signals you haven't forgotten, that you're still watching. And they start giving you shorter answers. Not because they've healed, because the shorter answer is the one that ends the check-in fastest. They've learned that sharing leads to a kind of attention that's harder to carry than the difficulty itself. And so next time, they don't share. Not because they don't need to, because they've calculated that the cost of sharing is higher than the cost of managing alone. Number 4. Treating what someone shares as a problem to be solved rather than a feeling to be heard. This is different from moving into action. The person isn't in crisis. They're not asking you to fix anything. They're offering something more fragile, an admission, a fear, a confusion they haven't said out loud before. And the response is advice. The person offering the advice has taken the vulnerability seriously and moved directly to what might resolve it. They're treating the problem as solvable, which is, in its way, a form of care. But vulnerability isn't primarily a problem to be solved. It's a moment of exposure. And when exposure is immediately met with a solution, the implicit message is, the feeling itself is not what I'm interested in. The situation is. Let's fix it and move on. The person who shared something difficult now has a list of things to do. What they don't have is the sense that what they felt, the fear, the confusion, the weight of it, was the part that mattered. That they could have stayed in that feeling a little longer with another person before being moved toward resolution. Over time, they stop bringing the vulnerable things. Not because they're less vulnerable, but because they've learned that vulnerability in this relationship is a prompt for problem solving. And sometimes what a person needs is not to have their problem solved, it's to have it witnessed, without the immediate pressure of being fixed. Number 5. Making the help about yourself. This one is rarely conscious, but it happens with some consistency, particularly among people who genuinely care and who find it difficult to watch someone they love struggling. The help is offered, and somewhere in the offering, the focus shifts to how distressing this has been to witness, to the worry that was felt, to the difficulty of not knowing how to help, to the relief that things are better now, for the person offering as much as for the person who needed help. And the person who was struggling finds themselves, subtly, taking care of the person who came to help them, managing the helper's feelings. They end up reassuring you that they're okay, so you can feel less frightened by how not okay they are. To need help, and to find that needing it creates a responsibility to manage the emotional response of the person you needed it from. To come away from a moment of vulnerability having been helped, technically, but also having done emotional labor that wasn't yours to do. Number 6. Treating someone differently after they've been vulnerable. The vulnerability was shared, the crisis has passed, and something has changed. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough to be felt. The person who was helped is now handled slightly more carefully, asked slightly fewer hard questions, protected from certain conversations, treated in a way that's hard to name but impossible to miss as someone slightly more fragile than they were before. You may be trying to protect them, but to the other person, it can feel like reduction. Because what the person who was vulnerable actually wants, after the difficulty has passed, is to return to being the full version of themselves in the relationship, not the version that needed help. Being treated more carefully tells them that the moment of vulnerability changed how they're seen, that the person who helped them has updated their picture, and the update is toward fragility, towards someone who needs to be protected rather than fully engaged with. After that, they may start protecting how you see them by revealing less, not because they've healed, but because being vulnerable led to a shift in how they're treated, and the cost of that shift is higher than the cost of carrying things privately. Number 7. giving the help you know how to give instead of finding out what would actually help. This is different from the other 6. It's not about what happens after the help arrives. It's about the moment before, when someone chose what to offer without quite asking what was needed. The help being offered is the help that's easiest to give, not necessarily the help that's most needed. The practical assistance when what was needed was emotional presence. The emotional support when what was actually needed was space. The company when what was needed was action. The action when what was needed was simply to be heard. Often we give the kind of help we know how to give, not the kind the other person actually needs. Not from indifference, from the anxiety of the situation, the urgency to do something, the comfort of knowing how to do at least this. And the person being helped receives something real, care that is genuine, presence that is sincere, but that doesn't quite fit, that addresses something adjacent to what they needed rather than the thing itself. And over time, they stop asking for what they actually need, because asking leads to receiving the wrong thing, kindly, sincerely, with real love, and that's somehow lonelier than not asking at all. Here's what connects all 7 of these. They all begin at the same moment, when the helper acts before asking what would actually help. And the person receiving ends up carrying something extra, not just their original difficulty, but the weight of the care itself, the cost it created, the shift in how they're seen, the need to manage the other person's feelings about their situation, the gap between what was offered and what was needed. This is how people who genuinely love each other can create the feeling of being a burden, not through indifference, not through cruelty, but through care that moved too fast, that skipped the step of finding out what this particular person, in this particular moment, actually needed. The result is a person who stops asking, who starts managing their difficulties privately, who learns that needing things in this relationship comes with a cost, visible or invisible, intended or not, that makes them hesitate before the next time they reach for help. And eventually, one person carries more than they should, and the other doesn't know why they're being kept at a distance from the parts that matter most. If you recognized yourself here, that doesn't mean you don't care. Often it means care became mixed with anxiety, urgency, or habit. You wanted to reduce the pain quickly, and helping gave you something concrete to do. The question isn't whether to help. It's whether you can pause long enough to understand what help looks like for this person in this moment. If any of this describes something you recognize in how you give care or in how you've received it, I want to offer one reframe. The goal of care isn't to fix. It isn't to be seen helping. It isn't to reduce your own discomfort at watching someone struggle. The goal of care is to leave the other person feeling more like themselves, seen without being reduced, supported without feeling indebted, helped without becoming the fragile one in the relationship. That kind of care starts with a question rather than an answer, with presence before action, with staying in the discomfort of not immediately knowing what to do, long enough to actually find out what would help. Most people who feel like burdens didn't become that way because nobody helped them. They became that way because the help they received taught them, slowly, that their needs came with a cost. That cost doesn't have to be there. Help should lighten what someone is carrying, not add the weight of having needs.